on the Earth, Wind and Fire recordings, your bass tone was always so crystal clear, percussive, but you can always hear the pitch. You're always playing with your fingers?
Yeah, I'm originally a classically trained bass player, so learning how to play with my fingers was pretty much the most technique, the way I started my technique of playing, you know, using two fingers. And with uprights, you have to play like that, and as with the bass guitar, I started. And it gave me an opportunity to have a lot of flexibility, to learn the tone of the bass, different positions. So that's how I started with playing two fingers.
Is there a favored spot on the bass you like to anchor your hand? Or?
Yeah, I generally hold it right here for starters, and then as the tempo of the tune goes, and I'll hold it wherever I need to hold it. You know, different places on the bass, but generally I hold it. Originally in the older days when I had a Telecaster, they had little areas where you could put your thumb, you know, like a little thumb bridge.
Right.
But now, you know, you just put it where you need it. You know, on my 5-string, I'll put it on the 5th string. You know, but here I'll just put it where I can find it. You know.
So it's there if you need it. And you generally using two fingers, sort of as a rule, or that's just natural?
It's very natural. When I started as a player, it just came very naturally. It wasn't anything I had to develop, because studying classically, you're practicing 8, 9, 10 hours a day. So it's just it's a natural reflection, a natural rhythm that you're playing with.
Yeah, and you can play slow and fast, and you have all the ability to do that with just the two fingers.
I very rarely play with one. I'll generally play with two. It gives it, you know, like if something like on Can't Hide Love. You know, and it's nothing I consciously think of. You know, it's like a piano player. He doesn't think about the where his hands are. It's just a natural process that you learn over time.
On the arrangement of Got to Get You Into My Life, there's so much going on. I just think all those horn lines in triplets, and there's a lot of rhythm going on. How did you find your part? That horn line at the top,
right. I completely stayed out of that one. Originally, Maurice said, "You want to try that line?" I said, "Look, we're going to be here for a year. Let me do what I could do, right?" And so I just, I got out of there. And I just played along with the tune, and the tune was in G. You know? And thirds.
Yeah.
I just cut loose. I said, look, I'll do the line. I'll overdub the line later when we get back to L.A. And we just jammed. We just grooved it. And we didn't think the song was going to come out. So I was actually free. I wasn't as restricted. So in that case, it really was a great thing that happened.
Freddie, being such a busy session player, you have to be ready for any situation. Would that be the reason you have using a 5-string bass?
Yes. Yeah. One of the big reasons I'm using a 5-string bass is because of the wide range I can get in tones and low notes. And I'll demonstrate for you one reason why. I'll play a little Latin line, say something like this in D. Then I can drop down to the low D.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big reasons
Right.
why. Yeah.
Did you have to adapt your right hand position when you switch over to 5-string
Well,
very much?
Not really, because when I was playing 4-string, I used to rest on the E string. Now that there's a 5th string, I'll rest it on the B string. So just knowing now that I have that B string there, treating this, it's like you can get confused and think it's an E string, and you can play a F instead of a C. Yeah.
You have to attack it being such a fat and low string. You have to attack it a little bit easier.
No, I try to treat my instrument where is I attack each string the same. I try to get an even tone all the way across. I won't play these strings any lighter or harder. It's just an even tone. So I like the evenness of. I try to play one way the whole time. I never really try to hit hard on any string, any one particular string.
Is there any time when that 5th string really gets in the way, like maybe like when you're thumping or popping or something?
No, it's well, if I'm playing something in E, I can use either the open E or I can use the closed E on the B string. And I will kind of mute the B string with my thumb to keep it from ringing. Because if I don't, I'm going to get this and I can slap all over it.
So that muting's in your left hand there.
Yes. So with this, I kind of keep everything pretty much with the right hand.
So it adds to it. Oh, and that Latin figure you were playing earlier, could you play that again?
Yeah.
So do you mainly start with mainly play with 2 fingers, just 2 fingers, or?
Yes, I've because I started out playing upright bass.
You did.
And the training that I got on that was from the 2 fingers. And I don't really go to a 3rd finger or anything like that. I use everything with the 2 fingers. And when I change the thumb, and then I go back to the 2 fingers. Some players will use 1 finger or another, but I'd like to use 2 myself. Yeah.
So even if you're playing triplets, it's always 2 fingers, or?
Yeah, always 2 fingers. Fine. Yeah.
You mentioned you always try to hit the strings evenly. How about for like dynamics, like in volume and with the right hand?
Yeah, dynamics. That's a big thing. What I do, I'll leave the bass wide open, and I'll play. Say, for instance, if I'm playing something that requires a lot of dynamics, I'll use the dynamics with my fingers. Say, if I'm playing. But I just still want to keep the same intensity, but just bring the volume down.
So how do you keep that same intensity?
It's just the pressure. It's just the pressure of the string. It's not that I'm hitting it any harder or any softer. It's just the pressure. Now it's just louder. Yeah, it's just the pressure of the fingers.
Yeah. It's so important to the dynamics, but still have that.
Yeah, and still have that intensity in there, because you can play so low and so light where you just lose the intensity, and then you can play so hard where it's just muddy and flapping all over the place.
Yeah. So how did you use the backbeat? The drummer using the backbeat in telling what to play there.
The backbeat depends on where I hear it. And it depends on, I kind of use a body language on where I'm going to set the tone of the groove also off of what he's going to do. Say, for instance, if he's playing a backbeat that's more head, I'll play a little bit on the edge, but it won't be like I'm rushing or anything. But I'll just play a little more on the edge. Or if he plays a backbeat where it's sitting behind really into the groove, I'll sit back there right with it also. So it kind of dictates what I'm going to play,
Right.
and how I'm going to feel also.
So at that point, you're really playing with the drummer. Yeah, could you give us a little demonstration of that?
Yeah. Rich, can you play a little rock groove? You got it. Okay.
And if you had a sixth finger on your right hand, you'd probably use that too. I bet.
Yep, I use all of them.
Man, with your hand just flying all over the place, how do you keep from hurting yourself?
Well, it's easy. Just concentrate on hitting the string exactly. I pick out this note. Pick out each string exactly. You got to have precision and preciseness in picking those strings.
Right. Are you always thumping on a certain area down there?
I always thump
Generally.
right here. And there's another way you can pluck it, pull it. You don't have to thump it. You can go. You know, you can go.
That sound, yeah.
That's another way you can do it.
So when you're thumping and plucking, are you thinking like a drum pattern, or?
It depends
downbeat?
on the song that I'm playing. When I worked with Quincy, he would have us do a lot of patterns like with Michael. That one. There is no thumping, but I am using the original. I originally started thumping by pulling like this, you know?
Right.
You know?
You mean in the old days when you first started getting into it? Is that what you mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I used to just play with my thumb by itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it developed
just
into.
developed into thumping.
Yeah.
And a lot of people told me I play like Larry Graham, and I had never seen the guy or met him. I met him today. And I met him before then, you know. But I was surprised. I didn't know who this guy was. You know, he kept telling me. I think it's a natural thing that bass was going to, you know, evolve to in the future, and it's a style that everybody's doing, and they like it. And the more that they play it, it's different than the other basses, because bass players, because they use their baby finger. Well, I use my thumb. I don't use this baby finger when I'm thumping. I use it, you know. You know.
So, yeah, the left hand definitely involved in this sound too.
Mm-hmm. And that percussion right here. You know.
Whatever you can find to make rhythm.
So they play, you know, hand in glove together, and it was a natural thing that bass was going to evolve to anyway. So now everybody's doing it, and I enjoy it.
You're great at it. I also don't you, like regular, like when you're just playing with your fingers, like a run. I've noticed you use even your little finger. Does that help you get speed, like using all 4 fingers, or is it just enough?
Yeah, when I do like a run, say if I'm going, I'll go something like that. You kind of feel yourself and you go off, you know, into the. Yeah, you get it. You hit the bass, you beat it. I mean, it's kind of cold on the instrument, but it's good.
So when you do play, like a walking line or something, and you're just using your fingers, you generally play with just 2, or you use them all, or?
I use all of my fingers. You know.
Yeah. So that's like 3 for a triplet type figure.
Yeah. You know. You know, all that kind of stuff. I use.
That's an interesting pattern what you're doing there.
Yeah. You can experiment with your fingers and see what's comfortable for you. And you know, whatever you like to do. And I taught myself, so I just created whatever I wanted to do. I just figure out a way to do it. I didn't have a teacher to say, now this is how you're, no, I didn't. I just, if I wanted to do that particular bass thing, I just played it.
I understand you started out as a drummer. What brought you around to the bass?
Well, I was a drummer in a couple of bands, and I found that I was more interested in playing guitar than I was drums after a while, because I could stand up in front and be more of the focal point. I learned guitar, and I think I bypassed the guitar player in my band in about 6 months, and that was encouraging. And the exact same thing happened with bass. It only took a few years before I realized that I was learning the bass lines from all the records a lot better than the bass player was. And I looked around me, and I liked a lot of things about bass. I liked when I saw a really good bass player and the eloquent way he used his fingers and his left hand, you know, and the coordination of it. And I liked what the bass added to the record. And I decided that I really didn't want to be the main focal point. I wanted to be the support. And I just fell in love with the instrument, fell in love with some of the great players, and and the, you know, the little unknown of what they were adding to the record that most people weren't really paying attention to. And I made the switch.
So you mentioned the fingers. So you started playing with your fingers right away then.
Right away. I liked that. I liked the freedom that it offered you as opposed to playing with a pick on guitar.
They're like the body contact with the instrument.
Definitely.
More. You have an interesting way of holding your I noticed your ring finger and little finger out of the way a lot. Is it because you don't use them that much?
I think that I was really influenced more by, eventually by the upright players than I was by electric players. I noticed that the upright players, the guys who had the big fat sound, the Ron Carters, really, really put a lot of weight into the string. And even and James Jamerson, you know that he really put a lot into that string to get the sound. And I like the fat sound.
So holding that, you feel that gives you more strength or something when you want it?
I don't know that I ever put that much thought into it, but upright players a lot of times will hit a string with 2 fingers see it's really quite a thud.
Some more meat.
Oh yeah. I don't really play like that, but that's where it came from. I like playing with the fingers the best.
You ever use, I mean,
More than two?
More than two? Yeah.
I don't think so. It's always there. I like to. I like when I watch Abe Laboriel do his flamenco and go.
Back and forth on the nail, I mean?
Yeah. Well, he can use 3 fingers because he's flamenco, oriented. I think, but I don't use it not in practical applications.
In the studio, do you ever get asked to use a pick?
Well, to answer that question, I would say there's 3 basic right-hand styles. There's 3 techniques. The pick was the first, I think, and the most. I think that's the earliest style. I think it developed into fingers, which was, basically borrowed and transferred from upright playing, and then, of course, all the newer styles with the thumb. Out of the 3, I use the pick the least, because it's not that prominent style in a lot of today's records, or what the demand is. Mostly fingers and thumb is the most common. Pick is a very thinner sound because you've got no roundness of the fingers, no body going into the string to get you that sound. And even though thumb style sometimes is a little bit less, it's got a little bit less low end, it still has so much personality that it overcomes the low end.
Personality in what way? Hitting in different...
Well, it's got a lot of focus on it, sometimes there's low end compensated for, with synthesizer when people play with the thumb a little bit. But yeah, it's a very rhythmic style. A pick is just basically picking the notes and going for that muted sound. The best way to demonstrate it is I'm not going to use a pick, but the sound of Paul McCartney was always like that.
Kind of a thuddy, percussive type.
Yeah, it's got no sustain deliberately, and it's got character. There's a character to it. It's got a very Beach Boys type of sound. In the earlier R&B records, everybody wanted to hear it. Big round sound. That with the pick would sound kind of stupid. And then that's got a lot more rhythmic capabilities.
Right.
So, because of all the muted notes in between, which I'm sure is not necessarily anything new for this purpose.
When you're coming up with parts, like when you're thinking percussively or rhythmically, do you think like a drummer sometimes? You look back in the past when you were a drummer and certain characteristics of the bass, snare, hi-hat, whatever.
I don't think about it at all, actually. And I think that's the secret. The whole secret to music and interpreting and playing bass or any other instrument in the studio, where you're achieving perfection, absolute perfection. You want to get the perfect part that blends in with all these other perfect parts. And the amount of conscious effort into it, I think, is it's there. It's overall there, but it's not deliberate. It's instinctive. You want to be able to. You want to be enjoying it as much as possible so that what you play really feels like it works. It feels like it's very natural. The drummer is playing something, the guitar is playing something, and you want to come up with a part that just works right into the groove, right into the rhythm, and doesn't necessarily call all the attention to it unless it's supposed to, specifically.
So it really comes down to listening to what's going on around you.
Yeah, I mean, bass for the most part, it's really a matter of musical sensibilities. It may call for one note, it may call for 2 notes, it may call for long tones, short tones, but it's not a matter of really figuring it out in any technical way or consciously thinking about, well, let's see, if the drummer's playing this and his foot works this way with his right hand, it never happens. It's all instinctive. It's split-second thinking. It's just natural instincts.
What's happening?
Larry Graham. You're the first bass player that we heard on the radio doing that thump thing. What gave you the idea to start doing that?
Well, I have to tell you a little story if you don't mind.
Sure.
It kind of goes back a few years to when I was about 14, 15 years old. We had a little duo, Moms and I. And for a while, I had my drummer playing with us, little trio, but that didn't work so well. So we went duo, but see, the thing of it is after we didn't have drums, it caused a problem. See, I kind of miss not having that backbeat and that snare drum. So I had to kind of compensate. But now, interesting, see, I came to the bass from the guitar, and we had an old organ in the club, and I used to play the bass with my foot, see, while I was playing the guitar. But now, since it was like a duo, and we didn't have that organ, I went and rented me a bass. In the meantime, till we get the old organ fixed. But the organ was too old. It couldn't be fixed. So I ended up keeping the bass, and then when we ended up without the drummer, I started thumping to make up for not having a bass drum, right? Okay, so that kind of made it for the bass drum. But now the snare drum thing, I had to compensate for that too. So I did a little thumping and plucking like every day I have the blues and things like that, you know. And so this went on for a while, and it was interesting. There was this lady that used to listen to my mother and I all the time. She used to come in the club and request songs, and we play them, and she became a fan. And so she was also at the same time a fan of this young man who was a disc jockey on KSOL in San Francisco. His name was Sly Stone. So she found that he was going to start a band, right? And so she said, you got to go down and hear this bass player. His name is Larry Graham. Go check him out because you might want him in your band. So he did. He came in. He liked what I was doing, asked me to start playing in his group. Got the name Sly and the Family Stone, went in the studio. And the first thing we did is a little something like this. Dance to the music. Dance to the music. Dance to the music. Dance to the music. At the bottom, so that the dancers just won't hide. And that's how that got started, you know what I mean? And then a little time passed. We went in the studio and did a little thing. Well, I got a chance to feature my thumping and plucking. A little song called, well, it was really to thank everybody for the first hit. And I got a chance to thump and pluck on a little thank you like this. They, ah. Thank you for letting me be myself again. Now, you might want to ask me a little something about that.
You're pulling with more than one finger on that.
Right, right, right. Check it out. Thumb, thumb, thumb. And then you add the finger thing here. And there. See, it's important to pull it and get that little snap on it, you know.
Byron, I've heard you do a interesting interesting technique. It sounds like some special muting on some lines.
Yes, actually it originated in, you know, it's a sound, you kind of put your hand on the strings here and play with your thumb.
Yeah, that's how you do it.
And it's a sound that came from, actually it came out of Detroit. James Jamerson Sr. used to put foam rubber in his bass here. So, you know, every time you want that sound, you can't pull out foam rubber, so, you know. And playing with Luther right now, he loves the sound, you know. So that's how that came about.
Yeah, that's great to be able to do it at will.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
somebody asked you to do it, or you want to do it at that time.
Right, right. So, and then, you know, a lot of synth bass has that
Yeah.
sound, and it gives a little deeper bottom. So that's basically
Yeah,
that.
I noticed you have to go into a special hand position for that.
Yeah.
What's your more like playing with your fingers?
Mhm.
How is your basic? Where's your starting point? You rest your thumb on the.
Basically,
string.
you rest your hand against the end of the bridge here, and then you just do whatever makes you feel comfortable to get around and pluck the string. You know, you can hold, you can get a real, the harder you push down, the more mute sound you get. Or it's very easy to go from mute to thumb. Fingers.
Yeah, great combination.
Yeah, so it's a great sound to put with whatever else you have. You know, it sounds great in ballads, you know, so yeah, the mute.
I noticed playing a 5-string bass, was it hard for you, technique-wise, to change over from 4?
For me, it was major. I had to, when I first got it, I was in Japan playing with Shaka Khan. And I got the bass, and I thought I could go right on stage and play it. And it was like a new world for me. I kept mistaking the B string for the E string, and almost got fired off the gig that night.
Oh.
So I had to go home and really sit down and get used to it, you know, because when you play with a 4 for your whole life, and you have this extra string, it's like, man, what is that? You know, now they have 6 strings, I don't know if I can get up that high yet. But yeah, I had to revamp the way I was thinking about the bass and the low notes and where to place them and all of that. So.
Do you rest when you play, do you rest your thumb on the low string? Or?
I basically, yeah, when I'm playing on the higher strings. But the way I've played for years is basically putting my thumb on the pickup here, you know, but either the pickup or the end of the neck. And then
Yeah, let's see. Now on your album, on your credits, I noticed you produce the album, and you sing, play bass, and solo. You also do a lot of the drum programming.
Right.
Could you talk a little bit about the benefits of playing with programming synthesized drums?
Well, to be honest with you, I would rather play with a drummer.
Mm-hmm.
But with the type of budget that I had to do my album, it made more sense for me to program the drums and to do it to, you know, to cut costs. Because I have a lot of good friends who are drummers who didn't speak to me for a while. They said, "You didn't let me play on your album." But it was a cost thing that made me do it. Playing with drum machines and whatnot, it's cool in a sense when you know, if it's just a straight funk kind of thing. But if you're playing Latin music or something else, I couldn't do it. You know, so it was a cost thing. Mm-hmm. You know, and I've got dogged for doing it, to be honest with you.
Well, you being a bass player, what kind of thing did you think about, you know, programming a pattern from a bass point of view?
From a bass point of view, and from the way that I taught myself how to play, basically I get a groove. If you know, that's basically what I'm looking for. Not a bunch of fills or anything, just a pocket, and to play with the pocket. You know, whereas with a real drummer, then you play off each other. It's another whole thing. So I'd rather play with a drummer. You know, my next album will be full of drummers.
Nathan, you're one of the most recorded bassists in history.
Really?
What do you think are the most important factors in bass playing?
Well, the most important thing to me is to, you know, keep the foundation for whatever the music is that I'm playing beneath, and sort of color the music from the bottom end and kind of hold everybody up. Be the cement in the rhythm section, the liaison between the rhythmic instruments and the chords. You know, so I have the drummer and on one hand, and then the guitarist or the keyboard player on the other hand to listen to. So bass to me is kind of the glue, the pulse, the foundation of the music.
Mm-hmm. Very supportive role, and
right, team player.
Yeah, and I see you have a 5-string here.
Right.
You started out on 4, I imagine. 4
yes.
string.
Yes.
Did you have to change your right hand technique very much to?
Not too
switch
much. I would think that the thing that's most crucial is reading, and when you see an E, not reaching for the low string. You know what I mean? So there's a little to get used to with the low B, but pretty easy transition.
Which you have a starting point for like a standard place? You hold your right hand.
I usually hold it just above the that middle pickup, and I usually mute the B. And I switch to the E when I'm playing the other strings, so it's back.
And when you switch, how do you mute the low string then?
And I mute it just by resting my thumb, the flesh part of the thumb on the string. So they're both muted right now. So.
Playing in so many different musical situations, especially in the studio, you ever get asked to use a pick for a certain sound?
I do, and I use pick from time to time, but I let my fingernails grow on my first 2 fingers so that I can. so that I can use that as a plectrum. You know, so I can get away without using it because sometimes I'm a little uncomfortable with a pick.
On a date, what do you listen to mainly in the drummer? Like his kick or a combination of
I listen to the
hi-hat?
drummer's kick, drum, and snare mainly. And for instance, the drummer's kick could be. You know, so that's basically just the bump, bump, bump kick drum pattern, and then they might go bump, bump, dunk, dunk. So you know, so I basically try to pick up on what the drummer's doing.
Okay. And that kick drum, that's really where you're starting from
Kick drum
most of the time.
usually the starting point.
Yeah, and I noticed you're doing some thumping over there. Is that something you get a lot of call now?
Yeah,
these
I
days still?
I usually try to combine a little bit of slapping and picking in any given tune. I usually do a lot of work with the fingers and a lot of rock music or more jazz or whatever, but I will on certain things, you know, switch back and forth from, you know, just get the meat of the finger and the actual tone, but end up. You know, so you get the fundamental rather than, because that kind of commits you to a popping bass line. So I do a lot of switching back and forth on a given tune.
So what, like, right-hand techniques would you recommend a bass player, you know, trying to get into a lot of studio work and stuff, working on the most important things?
I would say, you know, develop a good slap. You know, where you can get the notes. A lot of bass players, I know Marcus Miller really worked on getting that attack so that the note would be loud and using like as much flesh part, and so get the attack so you get enough note, and just experiment with different ways to make the note sound, you know. So with the right hand there, the picking technique, usually I use 3 different sounds. One would be the slapping sound. Another would be just with the meat of the finger. And then the other would be using the fingernail as like a plectrum. And on my own contemporary electric bass video, I go into more detail on these. I think it's REH is the company that's putting it out.
Yeah, James.
Yo,
Nice groove.
thank you.
Well, that was, one part was really digging into the kick drum.
I try to work with the kick drum a lot. Kick drum and hi-hat and snare, you know.
Did you
Make
say
it
that?
happy medium, but more closely to the foot.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
part was really digging in. What kind of bass is that?
This is LaFay. It's made in Germany. It's really kind of strange. It's a German bass with a French name, but it's custom made. It's made in Germany by the company named LaFay. 2 guys, Jens and Rainer.
Looks like it looks heavy. Is it heavy?
Yeah, it's heavy. It's made out of African rosewood. And rosewood, you know, are very temperamental, so I have to watch it in the heat. That's the only difficult part about it, but it's great. I love it.
Yeah, it's nice. Unique. You have a real, when you want to, you get a real bright tone. Are you using your fingernails sometimes?
Now, sometimes I mute with my right hand, depending on what I want to do, or it depends on which placement of the finger, where my hands is at.
Mm-hmm.
For the placing between the pick or it's warmer sound.
So you get a lot of tone from your right hand placement.
Yes. Well, it depends on where you're placing that between the two picks.
Right.
Pickups.
Also, I noticed you have an interesting, you have different places you put your thumb. You see even sometimes behind the low string.
Mm-hmm.
Is that for such kind of...
So the low B wouldn't resonate. You know, you can play and you might hear other strings rattle along when you record or not recording, but it's easier to mute the sound that way. And I guess I get that style just by watching my dad, what he had did, because he plays like that with his, he'd play like that with his thumb over here, you know.
So that puts you in that angle.
Yeah, it puts me in that angle. And plus, I'm used to playing with a guard over the strings that mutes the sound anyway.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This bass doesn't have one. Like when I play the Fender, there's a guard with a mute already built inside.
So you like a muted sound?
It depends on what the occasion is, the recording or live or the music that I'm doing.
So how do you get that? Can you get that with this bass? You do it with your hand?
Oh, I had to do it with my hand with this bass to mute it from here and play up higher instead of lower, you know. Lower, you get more. And then you can tell by going further up, the sound gets warmer.
Yeah. But as far as that, you know, that thing, the cap you have on your other guitar, that actually comes
the same sound all the way through. This way, I can change the sound.
Right. When did you originally pick up the bass? Did you play another instrument before?
Well, I tried to play another instrument. It was one Christmas. My father bought me a drum set and brought my brother the guitar. I came home from school and the drums was broken. So that changed my whole career there. So I actually picked up the bass, I think back in 1966 or 67 when I first went to the studio with my father. Listened to the sessions that he was playing, and I didn't quite decide what instrument I wanted to play then, but after a while, I thought the bass was exciting, and what my father was doing with it was great. It felt good. Everybody in the room was basically, it was magic. Just listening to what they were doing. I didn't know what was really going on. I just thought this was music. I didn't know this was going to be history and history in the making, rather. So I picked up the bass, and my first professional gig was with the Dells at 14, which was amazing, and I was scared as a dog. So, you know, I mean, I had to read too. I just started learning how to read, and to be put up on the stage, and your father say, "Hey, I'm going to the bathroom, take over." And like, what? So I got through it. I sweat though. I sweated a lot. I got through it.
Chuck, you've played for probably almost everybody in the business. To you, what are some of the most important assets a bass player should have, busy bass player?
A good bass, a good instrument to start with, and also a real knowledge of how he uses that instrument. Or I guess a better way to put it would be whatever instrument he has, that he knows the instrument. All the instruments are different, and that he knows what the instrument does well and what it doesn't do well.
On the topic of tone, what advice could you give for getting tone with the right hand?
In each player, it is different. I've got pretty big hand. Of course, they get bigger, but for me, this is a pretty big hand, and my fingers are thick. And although players with thinner fingers get the good sound, I approach it this way for me. Although I don't play upright, no one has ever paid me to play it, but I do play it, you know, for my own benefit. I think my stroke has a lot to do with the tone I'm able to get. And when I first started playing it, the bass, basically always, the upright bass is like this, and the touch is a pull back. The pull back like this, and they have this kind of rhythm going on. Now what I do is, of course, the upright becomes smaller, and it becomes more of a horizontal instrument. And for my technique, which I believe helps my my tone, is I play, if I'm playing on the G string, I'll play right into the D string. And also, too, as I play, I'm playing down into the body, and I'm playing right with the tip of my finger. So I incorporate the nail in my touch.
Some of the nail.
So that I can get a good clean thing. I will also kick back that way, you know, to do particular things. If it's running 16ths, now basically I do use both fingers when I basically do that, but I do have techniques that I do use that, so it's almost like a pick, the way I use the finger. And of course, my nails aren't that long. I don't think. I think the more nail I have, you know, if I wanted to be meatier, I'll just pull my hand back a bit and just use more meat like that, as opposed to that. Being primarily a studio player, I do try and get a clear tone or a defined note. And of course, it helps my speed too to play with the tip of my fingers. My calluses are right at the very end of my fingers, so I play right across the string. Like that. So even if I'm playing, or you know,
yeah, you could get the speed that a guitarist could get from alternate picking.
right. And I also have to my disposal regular or traditional bass technique as far as what the touch is. Play it right on the balls of my finger.
You ever get, like, how many fingers will you utilize? More than two?
Well, I just use two. Sometimes it sounds like I'm using three, but I basically stay with two. I have that facility. At the beginning of my career, I just used one finger. And then, of course, as time went by, I got that rapport with the other guy, with the other finger, to use both of them.
What did you mean? Sometimes it sounds like you're using three. Is there a technique you use to...
Oh, yeah, that one that I just described. Like if I'm playing, or that, or...
Yeah. Hey, could you play that, especially that string skipping thing, maybe a little bit slower? Demonstrate that? What you're using?
Actually, it's and with one finger, it's just about the same thing. As we'll show later, I do mute with my left hand, but I will. So with speed, and sometimes I will incorporate both of them. Like I'll start out with. So it depends upon how I feel, or you know, what the urge is, or what I have to play next. I guess whether I go back and forth, or whether I'll use two fingers. I think it's important to have a good touch with the right hand. It's the one you got to work the hardest on, because it's the stronger if you're right-handed. You take it for granted. And so it's the left hand that usually gets it before the right hand, because it's the weakest.
Abraham, it's known far and wide about your superb technique. Could you show some of the many ways that the bass strings can be attacked by the right hand?
Sure. One of the traditional ways for ballads is to attack it with the flesh of the thumb. That creates a very soft tone, you know. Then if you attack it with the flesh of the finger, it's also very nice, but it's a little bit more brighter sound. Then some people use both the index and the middle finger. So and each one has slightly different character, so it creates a deeper articulation. Then the famous hitting it with the flesh of the thumb to create more percussive sound. You know. So now what I'm doing is I'm combining all my 5 fingers to create the combination of the bass line and the chord progression by using strumming, striking techniques, which is another approach. Depending on how busy the rhythm section is and how many other musicians you are playing with, then the sensitivity of the player decides whether it is important to fill the empty holes or not. Traditionally, most rhythm sections or most musical situations would feel more comfortable with a clean, no frills bass sound, you know, like the first thing that I illustrated. But eventually I start thinking like a drummer, and I add like where the snare hit would be.
Backbeat.
And then the more I use my fingers, it could become similar to what hi-hat would do, so that I become. So the right hand has many, many varieties that one can use.
Yeah, should say.
Yeah,
could you talk a little bit more about that tapping you're doing on the top of your nails?
Yeah.
It's an interesting effect.
There is what in classical guitar is called a rasgueado. R-A-S-G-U-E-A-D-O. And it's something like that. So that rhythmically, I think, kind of like when the drum player, you know, musician would play the drum roll, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Then there is the taking one finger at a time.
Every
they
finger.
have your 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That way, rhythmically, a person can keep track of what the player is doing, you know.
get lost in the measures.
1, 2, 4.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Great.
You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that you can, and it creates a very nice effect, especially when it's like so that so that so that depending on the feeling that the player has inside themselves and the concept that they're trying to arrive at, then physically they start using their bodies as a means to create this, always keeping in mind that if you are by yourself, the criteria changes as to when these things interfere with parts that other players may want to play. You know?